I'll quickly introduce myself and then Kelly's going to jump in. So I'm Dave Peterson. You might know me as Dave, the scholarship coach. I think Kelly and I will each spend about 15 to 20 minutes sharing things from our respective expertise. And then at the end, we'll open it up for more of a live Q&A. But in the interim, if you have questions, if you want to drop them in the chat while Kelly's speaking, I'll monitor that. And if something's super urgent, I'll break in Kelly and let you know. But otherwise, we'll kind of hold questions to the end. So with that, Kelly, go ahead and get started. If you want to share your screen, feel free to do so.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dave. I am going to share my screen. Just real quick about me. I'm Dr. Kellie Coppi of Say Yes to the Essay. You might have seen me online in a bunch of parent groups. I'm from Say Yes to the Essay. I run Say Yes to the Essay. Certified educational planner focusing on helping kids get into colleges, helping families become more autonomous in the process from ninth to 12th grade. My super focus, though, is are the essays. So I have a performing arts specialty. My title is essay specialist. Um, so we're basically here today to, with our years of experience and our knowledge of the college admissions process, get you guys all situated, whether you have someone applying to college very quickly in the near future, or whether you have someone coming up on college down the line, or whether you have questions about college in general. We want to help you get a jump start on your college admissions process. Regardless of the cycle you're in. So my focus today is going to be on the essays. All right, perfect. College admissions essays. You might have remembered when you applied to college yourself, you had to write a little something. Maybe it was just like a statement about what kind of major you wanted to go into or what career you intended down the line. Over time, the purpose of these essays has shifted, or at least they become more nuanced. The major purpose of a college application essay, the Common App essay, a UCPIQ, a supplemental essay, is a values-based narrative. So many students struggle with the college admissions essays because they don't understand them. Whether a student works independently on an essay or whether they work in junior year after AP cycle is over with their teachers, a lot of times students will come to me with a 650-ish word narrative on why they want to go into the major of their choice, or just a narrative in general, like a descriptive essay. The purpose of an admissions essay is to tell a story, but tie that back to a value. So it's putting a claim to action, thinking about what's important to you as a student, as a person, that value, that trait, and really emphasizing how that comes across in your daily life, how it's grown, how you've changed because of it, what you've learned. Admissions essays are different from any essay written in high school, unless you're someone who like actively journals or diaries. It's really a process where you have to get deep, you have to get vulnerable, you have to get insightful, which isn't really the standard way of thinking for most teens. They don't wake up every day thinking about what values are important to them that day, how they're going to live their life. It's difficult for anyone. I mean, even as an adult, writing an admissions essay is tricky. So, a lot of students will have trouble crafting these narratives because even if they get A pluses in AP Lit and AP Lang, this is a shift in thinking, which results in a shift in writing. Values are concepts that drive your everyday life. They can be anything. So, the good thing about college admissions essays is that you have the opportunity to write really on anything you want. The bad thing about college admissions essays is that you have the opportunity to write on anything you want, which can be difficult to narrow down. So when you have someone guiding you, or when you have these tools that we're going to hand you today as to what to think about and how to think, it makes the process a little easier to narrow down from dozens of ideas to really find that perfect one that colleges should know about you. Any and all values are eligible for inclusion in college admissions essays. If you're a STEM student, you don't have to just write about academics and intellect. If you're a performing arts student, you don't just have to write about creativity and curiosity. You can mix and match. You can show different facets of your personality. If you Google like personal values online, you'll get hundreds of different words, phrases that you can consider. Even like financial stability is a value. And if you want to emphasize that somehow through how you've learned about it, how you've applied it in your life, that's a perfect direction to go. There really is no wrong value. There's just a less emphatic way of showcasing that value in a narrative. So the purpose of a college admissions essay is really to put a claim to action. So what we mean by that is, I just take the most basic one. If a student is confident, they're confident in themselves, their abilities, what they want to do for the rest of their life, you don't want to write an essay just on confidence, the definition of it to you, how you learned about it. You want to prove to a college that if you value confidence, you also know how to use it. So if you say confidence is important in your life, it's very important to put your best foot forward, to know who you are, to be able to speak your mind. You then want to have something in your narrative that also explores how you do that. Maybe you're the president of a club. Maybe you've advocated for a vulnerable population or a friend in need. Maybe you always voice your opinion, even if you're against the majority. So putting a claim to action, focusing on that value, showing how it works in your daily life. Brainstorming. So when students come to me, or when students work in general on the application process or the essay process, it's so crucial to start early, which is why it's great that all of you are here today listening in, because brainstorming is probably the most important stage, as well as the most time consuming. And what that means is that there are so many different values, so many different approaches, so many different prompts that your student might encounter, that you want to make sure they have enough time to really give depth of thought and personal connection to what they could write about. Some of my students, and some of students just in general, they know right off the bat, I'm going to write about curiosity. I'm going to write about this moment in my life that I learned about it, and this moment in my life that showcases how I use it. Other students, it's hard for them. They want to pick a hurdle. They try to figure out what they learned from it, or they want to figure out what their greatest emphatic value is. They have to ask family, friends, teachers, and then they kind of revisit what everyone else has said and kind of blend it with their own perspective. You need the time to write. You're going to have a main essay, most likely, the Common App essay, 650 words. If you're applying to the California schools, the UC system, you're going to have 4 350 word maximum essays. So it's a good thing, bad thing. You have one longer essay for one set of schools, you have 4 shorter essays for another set of schools. You want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to craft really good essays that will make you stand out, and that you're not just waiting till senior year begins to start thinking about this. No one says you have to write right now. You just want to make sure that you can be thinking about it, have it in the back of your mind, because you're going to need these thoughts and values down the line, be it for admissions essays, be it for scholarship essays. So making a list of a few key values at any time. You can ask your child tonight, hey, what are 3 things that are really important in your life? They can put it aside and just think about it over the next couple of months. With those values, you associate a moment. So if they tell you curiosity, ask them, when are you curious in your life? Or like, who really taught you that curiosity is important in your life? And then they'll note a time when they put that learned value to action, as mentioned before. Hey, how do you use curiosity today versus how you used it the first time you recognized it in your daily existence? So considering all these different factors, all these different ways where values can be emphasized, or how they've grown, or how they've challenged you, you're going to need time to think about that to really get the depth, nuance, and perspective that admissions committees need when they put weight on these essays. They put weight on these narratives. And these narratives are the only things, not only, but a significant part of what's only in a student's control, right? You can't control necessarily what a recommendation letter is going to say on your behalf. You can't even control test scores because you don't know how you're going to be day of. But you have so much time to craft these narratives The Common App essay prompts for the class of 2027 will open in the next few weeks, generally by the end of the first week of March. So you'll have from March through your deadlines in senior year to have a substantial essay. Within this cycle, there were certain essay prompts to me that really stood out. And this also really emphasizes our theme tonight of starting early. So, a few thought provoking admissions essays. University of Chicago. This is one of those schools where when students apply there, they get a little nervous because in addition to the Common App essay, they get thrown these essay questions, a variety of them that are just totally out of left field. So while you might be thinking of values for the core Common App 7 prompts that are often given each cycle, you then have to think of answers to these like weird questions, but they're so good. They're so inspiring and intriguing. But they're not the average question. So for an example, the longer one up there, in an ideal world where interspecies telepathic communication exists, which species would you choose to have a conversation with, and what would you ask? What would you want to learn from them? So right off the bat, it's a like sci-fi question. It's something you might ask a young child to get some kind of creative answer. But when you cut through all the words, when you really get down to the nitty-gritty of the question, it's really asking you, how do you appreciate, how do you recognize diversity? How do you really engage with people who are different? How do you find specific nuances of others and really learn to value something from them? They don't care what animal you're picking. They don't really care about the thing you want to learn about the animal. They want to know the reason why. If you can talk about dogs and dogs and family planning and somehow mush them together and come up with a narrative that makes sense with a purpose and an intention, that's what they're looking for. It's the same intention when students worry, like, I don't have a hurdle in my life, I don't have an obstacle. You're never getting admitted to a college because of an obstacle that you write about. You're getting admitted to a college because of the insight behind the choice to use that obstacle and really what personal connection you have and growth that comes from it. So while this question might throw a teen off guard about picking a specific animal and a specific nuance about them, it's really the connection that they make and the bigger picture and smaller picture narrative that they put forth within it. And then the second question as well, if you could uninvent one thing, what would it be and what would unravel as a result? That's not something that I can think of in an overnight. I need a couple weeks to really get a couple good answers running. And then I whittle down to the one that makes the most sense for me. So these questions, whether you're applying to Chicago or not, you will find that some questions come out of left field. So the more time you have to think about them, the better it will be, the less stressful it will be for your child. And that's why if you are having talks about college, or if you haven't even dove headfirst into anything yet, look at supplemental essays that are out for this cycle. Look at the Common App essays that have been provided for the class of 2026, which have stayed the same for the couple of cycles previously. You will get a good foundation as to what will be expected when it is time for your child to apply to college. Another essay that stood out this cycle was a disagreement essay. Describe a time when you strongly disagree with someone about an idea or issue. This came from Harvard, but I believe Duke and Yale also had incredibly similar essays where they wanted to know how you dealt with conflict, what you learned from someone who had a different opinion from you. They want to know because they want to see how on their campus you will react and interact with people who are different, with people who embrace the campus culture, but from their own perspective and in their own way. So thinking about basic things like this, what values you put forth in interpersonal communication can be a key theme that you find in your admission cycle, be it applying now or a couple of years from now. So the more familiar you become with the Common App essays, the more familiar you become with just doing a scavenger hunt online of different colleges and their supplemental questions, the easier it will be when your time does come to actually apply and to actually write, because you would have been thinking about it already. As mentioned earlier, brainstorming is the longest portion, the most in-depth, work-intensive part of this process. Some students think it's writing, but really once you have all the evidence, all the information, all the fodder you want for your narrative, the writing part is super simple. So familiarize yourself, um, Google search, go to these colleges' websites, and you will have a great foundation moving forward. And then I believe this is my last slide, keeping everything organized. If you have a student who's going to apply to highly selective institutions, you'll find that they have a couple more questions than others. You'll find that questions overlap between school to school. You'll find that some might have 10 supplementals plus scholarship or honors college supplementals. Some might have just like two or three. My recommendation to you is to keep everything organized. So understand what prompts you're going to be anticipating. So if you have a class of 2027 student, check that website, check the Common App website. By March, you should have the 7 or so questions you need. Take note of any and all ideas. If you start writing or your student starts writing notes about one specific question and they change their mind, just have them keep everything on a running Google Doc regardless, because you never know what you're going to need to pull from in the future. Keep all drafts for repurposing where needed. So you might start on an obstacle essay or an essay about a challenge you were going to overcome, but then maybe you figure out something different. You want to write about a specific moment in your life with your grandparent. Don't highlight and delete that obstacle draft that you started. Keep it, because most likely you're going to have a supplemental pop up somewhere down the line that asks about how you overcame an obstacle. That way, you've already started writing. You already have the beginnings of what could be a great essay that you can build upon throughout the process. So once prompts are released, keep a running Google Doc of all essay prompts with their associated school and word count. Cutting and pasting to a Google Doc, tabbing it out, making sure you have like a visual representation of what eventually becomes your comprehensive application. And that also makes it easier to cross-reference. So like I mentioned earlier, Harvard and Duke both had that conflict essay, how you deal with conflict. If you have tabs, you could write it for Harvard, you can tweak it, or if you even need to for Duke, and just cut and paste the other tab. That way you don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, did I already write this essay? I can't find it. Now I have to write 2 essays, when really you only have to write 1. I like to tell my parents when they come to me wanting to work with multiple schools for applying, I like to see their Common App essay. I like to see all of the prompts for all of the colleges, all those supplementals, because where they might come to me and say, oh my goodness, my student's applying to 10 schools. Each of the 10 schools has 4 supplementals. We have 40 essays to write and we only have a couple months to do it. I like to ease the anxiety and showcase how to strategize within those prompts. Generally, I don't think I've ever had a student that had to write 40 essays, but 40 really boils down to high teens and maybe 20 max when you strategize and when you select your options appropriately to work smarter, not harder. All right, so why is it important to get a head start? Like I said earlier, teens aren't actively thinking about the values that are important to them, and even the most dedicated student can struggle with coming up with a topic. Naturally, the more time they have to write, the easier it becomes. As you saw with the University of Chicago supplementals, some of them come out of left field. Even if you have a student who's really good thinking on their toes, by the time you get to senior year, by the time you get to deadlines, consider the November 1st deadline. If you have a student who has to write a University of Chicago supplemental for the November 1st deadline, the day before that is Halloween. The week before that for many students is a Spirit Week or homecoming. When on earth are they going to have the time to think of such a nuanced answer to such an odd question? I'll admit, I was a really good time management based teenager. That's a lot, having to manage homework, tests, Spirit Week, sports, extracurriculars, and writing these essays. The more time you have, the easier it will be for everyone, your student, yourself, your entire family. And senior year events, you don't want to shortchange those senior year events for your students, homecoming, senior breakfast, parking spots, Spirit Week. So it just becomes easier to focus on admissions essays when there's time. Focusing on an admissions essay includes just reading a prompt and thinking about it, just making your student, your child aware, having a conversation like, hey, think of important things in your life. We're going to revisit them even over the summer to really expand upon them so you're not stressed out come September. I can tell you that from experience. When a student has a homework assignment to write and a test to study for and an admissions essay to write, I come last when I'm working with students. Even if they have a deadline, it always falls school first. They don't want to get a lower grade in their transcript. They don't want to disappoint a teacher. They don't want to kind of not give their best effort with a group project. Admissions essays get put on the back burner, and we want to avoid that. We want to stop that cycle of using senior year as the starting point for getting application materials ready. We want to make sure that we are able to get that done so everyone doesn't have to stress during senior year. And like I mentioned earlier, many application deadlines fall around other important dates. So I had a lot of students come to me on Halloween, which wasn't fun for them and wasn't fun for me. You have deadlines right at the end of Thanksgiving break, meaning you might have a 4-day weekend for Thanksgiving, and one of those days is Thanksgiving. If you have travel, you're not going to have a lot of time to write. I also had students who had January 2nd deadlines, meaning New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Christmas, whatever holiday, whatever travel, whatever you have planned for those school breaks, whatever family engagements you have, factor that in, because from September to December, when you consider all the deadlines and all the dates that kind of overlap, plus school, plus activities, the days to actually write and brainstorm are few and far between. So the earlier the better. Again, that's what we're stressing today, getting started, getting a head start, regardless of whether you're a junior, regardless of whether your child knows what they want to do in college or in the future yet right now. Just learning and being able to have those conversations from the tools that we're providing you today is a great start wherever you are in the process. So, Dave, I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to send it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. I love that you pointed out like some very specific things about like holidays and how
Yeah.
that kind of interferes with this process, and then the big senior year things. I wrote a blog article a couple years ago, um, like kind of guessing, okay, here's your excuse for why your kid can't do scholarships this month, and here's their excuse. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
great, and it's very, very pertinent. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. As I said earlier, I'm Dave Peterson. You might know me as Dave the Scholarship Coach. That's the handle I use online. And in the spirit of what Kelly kind of wrapped up with, and what I want to start with is getting started earlier in this process. So, this is a quote from Crystal, one of my class of 2020 students' mothers. She sent me this email after their senior night, senior awards night, and this student won the most scholarships of any student in the school. But she says, "We wish we found you sooner." And what she means by that is that really, whether they found me is maybe not as consequential as they wish they had started the scholarship process sooner. So even when you have success, students are more likely to have success the earlier they start. So here's what I'm going to cover. I'll reintroduce myself, then I want to jump into the three categories or types of scholarships. Having that framework in mind is very important. We'll talk about the five-step process for winning scholarships. By the way, if you're on a computer, if you have your phone, you may want to have that handy. I'll have some things that you can scan QR codes for, some free resources and such that may be helpful for you. Then we'll talk about why students of all ages, and I mean pretty much all ages, even down to grade school, can apply for scholarships, but particularly high school students, why it's important for them to start immediately. Some scholarship resources, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Both Kelly and I will take questions. So, as I said, I go by Dave the Scholarship Coach, and I got into the world of scholarships out of necessity. When my son was in high school, we knew for sure he would be heading to college, just based on what he wanted to do in life. But it wasn't until about midway through sophomore year that I thought, oh, I should figure out how much this is going to cost. And when I started to look at what college costs these days, After I had the heart attack and regained consciousness, I realized that we had not saved anywhere near enough to pay for his college. And I listen to some radio shows where I hear people talking about their student loan debt. So I know the nightmare of that, even though both my wife and I didn't really have too much in student loan debt. We knew we didn't want him to be saddled with debt. So I spent about the next 6 to 8 months learning everything I could about scholarships. And then by junior year, he started applying and he won 3 scholarships as a high school junior. The day he graduated high school, he had earned 18 scholarships. And because of that level of success, a lot of our friends and family started asking for help. So got him shipped off to college. I'll circle back to him in a minute. But for the next year, I started working with some friends and family's kids. And it was the experience with my son and then these other kids that we're friendly with that made me realize there's a common process and a lot of common things that students can have to have scholarship success. So it was those experiences that caused me to start Scholarship GPS, where I'm the founder and head scholarship coach. And basically, my hope for the people I work with is to help the student get as close to a debt-free degree as possible, and help the family not drain their life savings in the process. All right, so enough about me. Let's talk about the 3 categories or types of scholarships. First of all, we'll start with need-based scholarships, essentially based on the family's income and assets. Net, the lower your income, the more need-based scholarships you may qualify for. The higher your income, the less need-based scholarships you'll qualify for. Need-based scholarships come from the colleges themselves, and they're based on the family's income and assets. Almost all colleges in the country use the FAFSA. Other schools use something called the um, CSS profile. But for purposes of here, we're going to assume that just about every college uses the FAFSA to determine what's called the student aid index. People are very surprised to find out how wealthy they are, at least in the government and these colleges' eyes. And unfortunately, people who would consider themselves middle class very rarely qualify for much, if anything, in need-based aid. A family that I worked with a few years ago, their household income, so this is mom and dad's combined income, was a little under $100,000. FAFSA came back saying you should expect to spend, or you can spend, nearly $25,000 a year for their one student. I know that that was not really possible for them based on their finances and their bills, but that's just an example of how little need-based aid is out there. I'm going to also lump student loans into need-based aid because that is often also there's a correlation with the ability to qualify for those. These are some quotes that I pulled from Facebook. They're actually about a year old now, but people are very surprised at things like the interest rates. You see 16, 18%. That's even for people with good credit. People are also surprised that they don't qualify for student loans because of various factors, whether they may have a default or something like that, or just have maxed out their credit or debt to income ratio, so they just don't have any credit left. The other thing that people are very surprised to find out is that students can only take $5,500 in loans their first year of college. That's a loan on their own. Anything above and beyond that, you, the parent or guardian, will be on the hook for. So you will be borrowing that money. Now, yes, maybe your kid will also be a borrower on that, but I've heard horror stories where, unfortunately, relationships with kids, fall apart, and you're going to be on the hook for those student loans. So, just wanted to bring that to anybody's attention who's not aware of some of those numbers. The second type of scholarship are merit-based scholarships. These are based on the student's proven abilities. And again, these come from the colleges themselves. They're essentially based on the student's resume. Most merit-based scholarships are academic, but there are also merit-based scholarships for artistic and athletic abilities. So like when you hear about the star quarterback who gets a full ride to a college, that's a type of merit scholarship. But for most of us mere mortals who aren't Tom Brady or Michael Jordan, we're focused on academic scholarships. One of the best things families can do, in my opinion, to maybe not guarantee, but at some colleges it actually is, some merit money is to, of course, have a good GPA, but standardized test scores are very often correlated with earning more merit money. So, higher GPA, higher test scores are how students earn more in merit-based scholarships. Now, the guarantee of those has a very wide range from places like Alabama that post a grid saying if you have X GPA plus X test score, as long as you get into the school, which you probably would with those grades and test score, you're guaranteed this amount in merit scholarship. Most colleges, though, it's a little bit of a black box, and there's some subjectivity to it. But I also want to point out, just like student loans aren't that easy to get, merit aid is not super easy to get as well. This is I've redacted a few things just for this person's privacy, but and this is also not anybody I worked with. In fact, I don't know this person, but just to prove a point, this person's student was class valedictorian, perfect ACT, perfect SAT, national merit finalist, great resume. They applied to a pretty well-known Big Ten school. They got in, got offered zero merit aid. Applied to their state flagship, got in, got offered $3,000. So merit aid is not it's not as generous and it's not as guaranteed as people often think it is. By contrast, this is a student I did work with, class of 2025. This student was awarded a full tuition scholarship from the college that she is now attending. And based on comments from her mother, which let me pull this up, you can actually hear an interview with this student and her mom if you scan that QR code. They believe that they earned this full tuition scholarship because they started this process early. They worked with me for many, many months before even knowing they were going to apply to this college. And by that repetitive process of writing the essays and refining her personal narrative, she was able to earn this full tuition scholarship. So again, starting early is really critical. That brings us to the third and final category of scholarships, private scholarships. And a big piece of how these are earned is how much time and effort students and families put into these. So, unlike the other two categories, these scholarships come from businesses and philanthropic organizations. For our family, this was incredibly important. This is two-thirds of the scholarships that my son earned. The other third came in the form of merit aid from his college. And ultimately, we only paid $1,500 for his college degree. That includes tuition, room, board, books, and fees, the whole 9 yards. Some of these scholarships actually just cut a check to their winners or all the people who win. So you can use those funds for anything you like. Best of all, these scholarships can be used at any college in the country, including if the student transfers. And anywhere from 25% to a third of students do transfer colleges during their college career. So that is also a downside of merit aid is that if you get a great scholarship at college A and then you find out after 6 months it's not for you, well, you're going to lose that merit scholarship. And yes, some schools do offer scholarships to transfer students, but they're usually far less generous and far fewer of them available. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter which of these three buckets you're pulling from. If you can pull from all three, fantastic. But the idea is, like I said earlier, get as close to a full ride. Hopefully, get your family or your student through debt free, and definitely want to keep your family savings intact so that you don't have to be 98 years old before you retire. So, how do you earn scholarships? Well, there are 5 unique steps. The first one, when I say it, is people are like, oh, of course. Yeah, you have to find the scholarships, and there are tons of places to look. Starting at the bottom right, if you scan that QR code, you can get a free download of the scholarship websites I recommend. And it even has a little write-up about each of them and what I like and dislike about each of those sites. There's about a dozen on that recommendation list. Beyond scholarship websites, jumping on Google and doing a search for scholarships for, and then describe your student. So, scholarships for students in Florida or scholarships for tall people. That's a real scholarship. Whatever describes your student, you might find a scholarship for. Your school counselor, your mileage may vary here. Some school counselors are great about scholarships and it's a priority for them. I'm going to say more often than not, though, school counselors are just trying to keep their head above water, making sure their kids all graduate. And college prep is lower on that list, and earning scholarships is even lower. So, definitely a resource you want to look into, but some are better than others. Your college, whether your student is in college, students can continue to earn scholarships as college students. To circle back to my son, I said he had 18 scholarship wins by the time he graduated high school. but he ultimately won 23 outside scholarships before he graduated college. So what's that work out to? About seven or so that he earned in college. So once you're in college, keep looking. Plus, your colleges that your students are applying to. Um, some merit aid is automatic as part of the admissions process, but other colleges have other scholarships that require separate applications. So always be looking for those. Again, philanthropic organizations, community foundations, things like that, and then private businesses, both large and small. Probably the best known scholarship in the world is the Coca-Cola Scholarship, but also look at small, credit unions in your community, lawyers, things like that. Step two, if you spend even any reasonable amount of time looking for scholarships, you'll find probably far more than your student could possibly hope to apply for. So you need to filter that list. And I use a kind of bullseye concentric circle model. Starting at the very furthest ring, is the student actually eligible, or will they be, before the scholarship is irrelevant to your life? Moving inward, check the due date. If you find a scholarship tonight that's due tomorrow, well, you could give it a shot, but chances are you're probably not going to do your best work. Similarly, though, is the scholarship due 9 months from now? Well, there are plenty of scholarships you could work on before that. So finding that sweet spot where you have enough time to do a quality submission, but not so much time that you're working on something that could be put off for a while. Local scholarships are near that center ring. Local scholarships get far fewer applicants than national scholarships, so they should almost always be prioritized. But I'm not one of these people that says only apply for local scholarships. I think that's a mistake. If nothing else, applying for national scholarships, which are usually always open before the national or the local ones, at least gives the student some practice to learn the process and refine some essays. Scholarships that have multiple winners are certainly to be prioritized. There's a national scholarship that every year I've done this from my son until this, well, I can't say this year because they haven't announced, but last year I've had students win because they award, at least in the past, have awarded over 4,000 prizes nationally. So those scholarships that have multiple prizes should always get a little bump up on your list. Small scholarships should get a bump up. Yes, it's great to win a $20,000 or $50,000 scholarship, but they're the ones that get all the entries. And that $1,000 scholarship or even that $500 scholarship is not as exciting for most kids, and they don't bother. So those small scholarships, you do have greater odds. But ultimately, you want to read about who the past winners were and things like that to see, is my student the target for this scholarship? Step three is the actual application where the rubber meets the road. I talk to scholarship providers nearly every day, and they all tell me that they reject more applications than they accept, sometimes as many as 90% of the applications because students don't follow directions. So that's your starting point. Beyond that, the student needs to be professional, accurate, and truthful. And then I use a methodology or a framework that I call the five pillars for the student to build their personal narrative. And one thing I want to clarify is the personal narrative is not the essay. That's not what I'm talking about here. The essay is how the personal narrative is expressed. The personal narrative is really more like their resume. So you can look at things like their academics, their extracurriculars, if they volunteer, their leadership, and their work or employment. And it's not that a student has to have something in all five of these, but they want to have probably at least more than one. Two or more is best. And what you're doing is weaving these experiences together to tell a story. Like Kelly talked about, values are very important. I would say with scholarships, more tangible things may be a little more important than colleges are looking for. Most scholarships really do appreciate students who have a clear path, particularly with their college major, maybe even their career, and then kind of have reverse engineered that. And so, for instance, my son, he wanted to be a history professor. So when we reverse engineered this, we said, okay, of course you're going to emphasize your history courses. But he was in his high school history club, became president of that club as a senior, so there was a leadership role. And then he volunteered at our local history museum in our town. So, he hit four of those five pillars in a very focused way around his personal narrative of wanting to become a history professor. I'll also note, because especially the younger students really panic when I say that it helps if they understand what they want to do in the future. My son never became a history professor. He's actually a practicing economist, and he basically, until all his scholarship applications were done, thought he wanted to be a history professor, did something where he learned about economics and found out that was actually his true passion. But he didn't lose any of the scholarships he won. Now, I can't say 100% certainty that your student might not win a scholarship that says, yes, you have to go into this major. But especially for outside scholarships, that's going to be very rare. So picking a target, and then you can certainly change your mind later. But like I said, that backward engineering really helps students have success. Step four, keep track of everything. You'll see in the center there it says check regularly. For a high school senior, and even I'm going to say about this time for junior year, students need to get in the habit of checking their scholarship email, which is a separate email that they should set up either just for scholarships or maybe scholarships plus their college admissions. I recommend that email be something the parents have the password to as well, so you can keep an eye on things. But they should be checking that every day as a senior. Scholarships are only, I shouldn't say only, almost all scholarships will communicate via email, and you don't want to miss that. So know what that expected announcement date. Scholarships are not great about hitting their notification deadlines, but they're usually close. You can jump on their website to see if they've announced winners if you haven't heard anything. Most scholarships are run on a regular cycle, typically annually. If you've applied this year and you're eligible next year, bump it on your list again to do again next year, even if you just submitted the same application. Any application is better than no application. If you can see who won, that gives you an opportunity to improve your application, figure out why. Maybe they'll post the student's bio, maybe they'll post the winning essay. But any information you can glean from past winners will help your student with their application. That QR code will take you to a tracking tool. It's the same tool that I used with my son. It's a simple spreadsheet, and it actually comes preloaded with about a dozen or so quick and easy. If you follow my podcast or my newsletter, I call them weekender scholarships. They're no essay scholarships, but they are legit because they pick winners. Now they are like winning the lottery, but you know people do win the lottery, so better to enter a scholarship that doesn't cost you anything than a couple bucks for a scratch off. Step five, what do you do when you win? Well, first of all, celebrate. Winning a scholarship is something to be very proud of. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other benefits of scholarships, but you definitely want to celebrate that. But then follow those claim instructions immediately. Scholarships have a very short window to claim your prize, and you don't want to miss that. That's another reason for checking your email every day. If a scholarship is renewable, know what those requirements are. Usually that will be maintaining a minimum GPA in college, but whatever it is, you just want to be aware of it so that you can meet those requirements for when renewal time comes around. Send a thank you letter or a thank you email. First of all, it's common courtesy, but as we get into another slide or two down the road here, you'll see a couple other reasons why you want to do that. And of course, use the funds wisely. I think it goes without saying that scholarships should be used for college purposes. But what I'm really talking about here is understanding if you start to win multiple scholarships, understand how each one is structured so that you know if you don't need all those funds in year one. Knowing how you can structure your scholarship so you squeeze every dime out of it is very important. All right. So those are the steps, but why should students apply for scholarships immediately? Well, money for college, obviously that's the main purpose here. I also said earlier that some scholarships will pay the student directly, so it can be a little bit of a source of extra income. And whether you want to allow your kid to maybe tap into a little bit of that just as a reward, I don't have a problem with that. We did that with my son, but obviously that's up to you the parents. Here's a big one though, resume enhancement. Scholar or winning a scholarship looks great if you can, get that on your college application. Yeah, it might be a little counterintuitive if you're trying to get merit aid or need-based aid, but if nothing else, it shows that, this other organization thought highly of your student, and especially if they won at a younger age, it shows them to be a student who is, pretty remarkable. Here is that reason for sending the thank you note. Many scholarships have other opportunities tied into their programs. Some of them offer things like alumni networks, networking opportunities. I've had students who've gotten internships from their scholarships. Some scholarships even have a scholarship for their previous winners, so only their previous winners can apply. But if you don't send that thank you note, they might forget to send you information about all these other benefits. So be thankful and keep yourself in the running for these other opportunities. Um, there's no two ways about it. If you're going to apply for scholarships, you're going to have to, I should say, your student is going to have to write essays. So writing or applying for scholarships helps them improve their writing skills, which is obviously very helpful for when you get into doing what Kelly works with, college essays. It's fantastic prep for the college application process. The processes are very similar. They're not identical, but similar enough that it gives the student more confidence in just applying for something in general. Students who apply for scholarships are more invested in college compared to their peers who get student loans, which seems like free money until those bills start hitting them in the face when they're 23, 24 years old. And they typically do better in college than students whose parents are just outright paying for college. Now, if you can afford that, that's fantastic. But students who apply for scholarships, put some effort into it so they take college more seriously. Senior year is the big year for scholarships. Now, as I said earlier, there are still lots of scholarships for college students, but just as a percentage of scholarships out there, senior year is the big year. But applying as a freshman, sophomore, junior is a great way to prepare for those big senior year scholarships. And just to kind of prove that point, there will be a full tuition scholarship for the class of 2027 opening sometime in February. I don't know the exact date. You'll also see that there was a full ride scholarship, which closes before senior year. Unfortunately, class of 2027, that opportunity has closed. So that was called the Coolidge Scholarship for those of you in classes of 28 and 29. Mark that down, the Coolidge Scholarship. That's a full ride opportunity only open to high school juniors. All right, so just a couple more points here about starting early. So, starting early gives the student practice plus an opportunity to win. On the left is Candace. She's one of my clients. She's still a client because when her high school freshman won, that was a few years ago, he is now class of 2027, and I'm still working with him. But even her fourth grader won a $2,500 scholarship. So yes, there are scholarships with, to me, $2,500 is not nothing. So, uh, you know, get your fourth grader applying for scholarships. And then on the right here is Madeline. She is class of 27 now. Is that right? Yeah, 27. So yeah, it was last year. She was a sophomore. This is her picking up one of her multiple scholarship wins as a sophomore. This was a $5,000 win, but she actually won $15,000 her sophomore year. By the way, the VFW Voice of Democracy Scholarship is one every high school student should apply for. There's no minimum GPA requirement. Over half of the students I've worked with from my son until this cycle, and we're not through this cycle yet, so I can't give data on that, but over half the students I've won or worked with have earned scholarships through this program. One more quote here. This is not one of my clients, but this was somebody saying she would have been class of 25. Yeah. I wish I had pushed my high school senior to commit to applying for scholarships. Later in her senior year, she found all kinds of ways to avoid putting in the effort, and that is a very common theme. Just a few more testimonials from a few other clients I've worked with, and a few free resources. So I mentioned I have a newsletter. It's called Your Daily Scholarship. Every Monday through Friday, I feature a different scholarship opportunity. Saturday are those weekender, no essay, easy entry scholarships. And then Sundays, I feature interview with college prep people like Kelly. If you scan that QR code, you will be able to sign up for that free newsletter. I repackage all of that as a weekly podcast, which is available on Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, all of those, and comes out as an audio podcast. And I have started putting at least my interviews out on YouTube, so those are available as well. With that, Kelly, I'll ask you to come back in here because we are going to tell you about a special offer that Kelly and I are doing.
Getting the ball rolling, starting early. As I mentioned earlier, those Common App essay prompts for the class of 2027 should be open. Last year, it was like February 26th. Should be open by the end of the first week of March. I have for this cycle a self-paced essay course. Typically, I work with students one-on-one. I still do work with students one-on-one if they need help from brainstorming through finalization, or if they have a draft that they're confident in and they just want someone to give professional feedback and another set of eyes. Um, so I have two options, but this self-paced essay course, it usually works for the students who are a little more introverted, a little less fond of sharing their vulnerabilities with someone, be it a parent, be it a professional, a teacher, or whatnot. It lets you go from brainstorming through finalization at your own time using the methods and process and structure that I use one-on-one with my students. But the benefits are more than just writing an essay for your cycle. The purpose of this course is to really make a family comfortable and confident with working on parts of the application process on their own. So we gave you some tools and some information and some answers today. Putting it to action in a course like this, it helps educate the parent on the process. So that way, if your student is comfortable going to you and bouncing ideas off of each other, you have the tools at your disposal in the course to assist them. It also provides families with information that might not be available in guidance departments. I know Dave had said not all guidance departments that he's familiar with have enough scholarships that work with certain family needs. I have some students who've said my guidance counselors are more equipped to handle transcript issues than essay evaluation. So you'd have that information in this course. It also provides the parent, like I said, with a resource to remain autonomous throughout all of the written components of the college application, and there's lifetime access. So if you have a class of 2027 or if you have a class of 2030 or you can use this course now for whatever college bound kids you have because as of now and for the last many cycles, the essays and written components, while they may change in specific verbiage, they do not change in intention or purpose. They're always values based. They want to make sure to highlight and emphasize a narrative and a purpose. And a direction, a specific approach from your student. So everything in this course will be knowledge based and process based. So your student has a purpose, a structure, a step by step guide from brainstorming through drafting. And it gives that comfort to those students who want to work on their own time, but also with a narrative that can be very authentic and open without having to worry about sharing it with anyone. They will have the guidance they need in this course to get from A to Z without having anyone interject. If, of course, you do need assistance beyond the course, there is an option within the course to reach out to me. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a nice tool to have in your back pocket if you have a student now who's applying, if you have a student in the future who's applying, if your student is graduating college and applying for grad programs, those statements are very similar moving forward as well. So, again, adding to the starting early, you can start the brainstorming component of the course now and then kind of pop into the course whenever you're available, whenever you want. And it'll take you through from start to finish in the time you have before senior year starts to get a little intense.
Kelly, thank you so much for telling us about your course. I'll mention your regular price for that is 175. I also have a course. It's video based, bite-sized lessons that takes both students and parents through the entire process from how and where do we find scholarships? How do we know which ones to prioritize? Lots of information on the actual application process, from best practices to lots of help on the essay piece, building your personal narrative. There are also examples of winning essays in there. And like I said, this is for both parents and students. Like Kelly, my course is once you buy it, you have lifetime access. So if you have a student, like you said, Kelly, graduating 2027, and then you have a current freshman, well, they can access the course and you'll have it forever. Plus, my course is still also helpful because, as I mentioned, there are still scholarships for college students. So even when they go off to college, if they want a refresher, something like, well, I want to see a winning essay or, which pillar is the most important for my personal narrative, that type of thing. My course normally sells for 197, but we are offering both of our courses, so a combined buy one get one offer for actually less than either of our courses normally sell for. So we're offering both courses to those of you who took the time here in the webinar to sit with us tonight for just 147. That QR code will take you to the link where you can learn a little bit more and sign up if you would like to. And we will send a follow-up email with this and also a link to the recording of tonight's webinar. So would love to see you both in the course, just like Kelly said, where you can, ask her questions. You can also ask me questions, as a member of the course. And I do also do one-on-one coaching. But if you're interested in that, reach out. Happy to talk to you about it. But either way, this is, I think, a great program for class of 27, 28, 29. So we'd love to see you in there.
Yeah, a lot of good resources for anyone starting or in the middle of or haven't even began to consider getting on that college bound journey, because a lot will come at you and you're getting great information from people who've been doing it for a long time. Yeah, our goal is definitely to help inform families, give them the tools they need, and yeah, we definitely we put a lot of thought and effort and energy into, as parents, as professionals, making this information as easily accessible and correct for you folks.
We should probably mention, Kelly. I don't know if I don't recall if we even discussed this, but our BOGO offer won't last forever.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know when we're gonna pull it, but
Soon.
yeah, sooner than later. Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. We should have talked about that before, but
Yeah,
um,
but if anyone, and I'm gonna absolutely, I'm gonna speak on behalf of Dave as well. If anyone is interested and they have any kind of questions about it, feel free to reach out to either of us, and
yep,
we don't expect you to dive in and then regret a purchase. We want to be able to answer any questions, and happy to have anyone on board who would like to make that purchase.
yep, absolutely.